All right, we're good to go. All right, cool. Thanks everyone for stopping by. Really appreciate it. A lot to cover, so we'll go ahead and get started. As you probably know, you are at the Tactical Diversion Driven Defense Talk. Go ahead and slide. So my name is Thomas Hegel, and I work with Logarithm Labs. I'm an incident response and security analytics engineer. And we have Greg here.
My name is Greg Foss. I'm the head of security operations for Logarithm, the company, and also part of Labs as a senior researcher. So, today what we're going to talk about is essentially diversion and deception and how this has been a very successful tactic in warfare, and then how we can kind of take those same sort of mindsets and techniques and apply them to information security. So, some of the key points we're going to be touching on are essentially, drawing attention away from the main point of attack. I mean, just simple diversion, right? And then misleading and basically trying to trap attackers and gain an advantage over the enemy when they're already within our environment, essentially. So traditionally, diversion and deception in warfare have been used for, whoops, did I skip? Oh well. All right. Have been used for years, very successfully in multiple operations, throughout all of our history, essentially. So Tom's going to dive into one of these in more detail.
Yeah, a lot of these give really great examples on the kind of tactics we're looking to transfer into the InfoSec industry. So the first one is Operation Mincemeat. If you're not familiar with it, basically it was a diversion tactic used by the British against the Germans, where they planted a corpse that the Germans thought was from a ship they sunk during World War II, and then the corpse contained tactics or plans to attack Greece, and so the Germans move all of their defenses from Sicily to Greece, and then the British attack Sicily. So really basic example of kind of just using diversion and deception to kind of alter the plans at the defense side.
So, can we apply this to InfoSec? According to Mr. SCOTUS, of course, yes you can. So
there's some basic rules that you're going to want to follow if you're going to try to do this. We ended up transferring this from the warfare side. Too fast. And there are going too far. There we go. So basically, there's a bunch of rules that you want to follow. A lot of the resources we cite at the end can go into this more details with you, but basically it all comes down to having a completely quality-focused defense plan. And basically, you're going to want to follow all of these things. I'm not going to go into these too far, but as long as you focus on quality and being able to see and hear everything that happens within your defenses with these tactics, then you're good to go. So have to see everything, know what's going on. Feedback at all angles is really important at this point. So going back to the slide I was just at, in practice, what we're going to talk about here is how to translate this into the InfoSec range with data, network, and then also securing the human. Now, we're going to focus on being able to translate these tactics into those three areas, and then we believe that once you master those, you can start to integrate that within your offensive measures as well, which is the part we really like.
all right. So first and foremost, we want to talk about network defense, right? So, of course, honeypots come to mind, right? Because honeypots are very easy to deploy, easy to configure, something that you can spread throughout your environment to make look like legitimate systems that, are expected to be there, right? All you have to do is move legitimate services, stand up fake services so you can trap this activity. And this is something we do both internally with Logarithm and with our customers. And it's been fun. We've actually learned a lot about some of the attackers that all of us are facing just by watching them in fake environments where it's not like really that bad if they're getting in and stealing stuff and whatnot. So it's really fun to just learn a lot about attackers by using these.
Yeah, and Greg actually, I don't know if you saw it, but Greg did a talk yesterday on actually using honeypots. Tons of use cases for these things. If this is something that interests you, definitely check out his actual full talk on this topic alone. But some of the use cases pretty much focus around being able to slow down and track what your attackers are doing while they're in the network. Wasting their time is absolutely key here. So once you start to apply this, you start to see that and track it, and it's a huge benefit for your defenses.
So the first one that we want to talk about is just simulating fake web applications, right? And so one of the most popular ones out there that's targeted all the time is PHPMyAdmin. And so this is actually just a fake PHPMyAdmin application. The nice thing about this is you can do this with any web application. All you have to do is essentially download the content, download whatever content they would be able to see after they log in, and just replace it with flat files and change the form actions to just write output to log files. Also take like PHP code snippets to write output as people visit certain pages and stuff like that. Just a simple tactic to catch all sorts of bad guys kind of poking around where they shouldn't be. And the fun thing about this is you can do this with any web application. So right here we're simulating a fake VPN service. So can you guess why we'd want to simulate a VPN? No one was in my talk, were they? So the main thing here, not just like gathering credentials and like usernames and seeing if like they're valid or if they have valid passwords, stuff like that, but we want to be able to run client-side code on their system. And this is perfectly expected if you log into a VPN service, right? Because you log in and then you're granted with a Java applet and you're like, oh, I need to run this because I want to get to more things. So, I mean, this is a great way to trick people into running client-side code on their system. Because then once they do this, you can use things like Honey Badger, or you can actually pop shells on them and stuff like that, within reason, as long as you've laid the groundwork to do that.
Yeah, so if the honeypot thing is something you're interested in, definitely check out his talk. It goes in a lot more detail. So that was the network side of using diversion defense. Now, how do we translate that into the data side? So instead of securing our architecture and our network and access into the environment, once they're in, how do we give them diversion and deception tactics against the stuff they're actually after, the data? So let's have Greg talk about those a little bit.
All right, thanks, Tom. So one of my favorite aspects of honey tokens and that whole kind of line of defensive tactics is honey tokens and document bugging. So instead of showing you how to like create these things and going through that whole process, I want to go through a little simple scenario here. So here's our shitty little network that I found on the internet. And so we're going to start off with our bad guy, right? He's the bad guy because he has a black hat, right? And so he wants to get this file from this share. This share is his laptop in this picture, but whatever. So what he's going to do is he's going to access this file, open it, read it. So now this guy has this file, and he wants to send it to his buddy. He's over here, going to pass through a couple systems, trying to make use of this little graphic. And he's a bad guy too, because he has a black hat also. So, fortunately, there is a security guy, right? And as soon as this file was accessed, he was alerted to the sensitive document access because of file integrity monitoring. And he's wondering, whoa, why was this file accessed? This person has no business accessing this file. And what's more, since they bugged the files as well, so in addition to file integrity monitoring, they can track where this file has been. So he knows like this guy opened it and he used this system to view it. And now he can also tell that he sent it over to his buddy way across, wherever this guy is. And so that beaconed back as well. So right here, you've got a little bit of data on where this possibly went. Now, it gets really fun when he decides to send this outside of the company, right? To a much larger entity, a giant black hat, right? Well, fortunately, we have a really awesome active defense server outside too, which was alerted to this document callback. So as soon as that happened, we can actually start to attack back. And that's kind of like the fun part, right? This is just where I kind of got ridiculous. But you get the point of like what honey tokens are, and yeah, just gone, right? This totally happens in real life, yes. But it's just fun. It's like you get the point of kind of the point behind document bugging and tokens and stuff like that,
Yeah, so other types of data with diversion is also zip bombs. If you attended his talk, he talked about those a little bit as well. But it's the idea of giving them something to unzip that they don't expect. This one you can actually download at that URL, unforgettable.dk. It's a 42-byte zip file. You unzip it, and you get a 4.5 petabyte file. So it'll give your attacker a good time. Name it, confidential.zip or something, and you'll have a good time with that, kind of pissing off your attackers. So very fun.
All right. So let's move on to human defense, right? Let's talk about actually securing the human, which is the most important part, I feel. And some keys to success with this are, you have to do real world testing against them, not just fake little phishing attacks where you misspell stuff and whatnot. Use real things that they're going to actually be hit with, because they'll learn much better the more realistic you present them with these kind of scenarios, right? So, and we like using a blended approach to our exercises. So at Logarithm, we don't just do, phishing attacks and stuff like that. We do a lot more in-depth attacks. And Tom's going to go through kind of a lot of some of these tactics that we employ within our organization.
Yeah, so one big piece of that is never, with the stuff that we're going to talk about here, never take that against your users and embarrass or punish them based on what you find through these. It's the quickest way to make this whole program absolutely fail, from an enterprise level and from an actual enjoyment from your user side. But so these couple examples we'll talk about really focus on first examining your network usage and then targeting these attacks towards your users. So this one, for example, is scoping your social habits of your user base. Basically, what we do is that we examine our network traffic and see what users and what groups go to what sites, such as LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and in this case, scoping their social habits. Excuse me. We see what type of public information we can get on them, and then we do any sort of like intelligence based around what we find on them, such as username correlation and so forth, and try to connect with them and see how easy it is for them to connect with somebody they don't truly know, even if we are claiming something else, and then see what private information you get from kind of the whole process. Now, if you there was a few things, I think a few weeks ago, where a technical recruiter was mapping out the InfoSec industry on LinkedIn. Great example of that. Basically seeing what else is out there, but that's taking it outside the scope and going, industry wide. But very fun example. So another one, free coupons. This is essentially the idea of using malicious QR codes and putting them on things for users to scan. We like coupons because we can just mass produce them and set them on every car in the parking lot, or hand them out, print out stickers with the QR code, or DerbyCon tickets, email them to people, see what they scan. But basically, you can modify the QR code to send them to a training site that says you've been phished or things like that. Or if you want to take it a step further, give them a landing page that has them enter their credentials for a free Subway from Jared, and then something like that, basically to start track your user base and who's vulnerable to that type of attack. And then another one, spear phishing. Spear phishing could be a whole talk on its own, as it is. Martin Bos and Eric Millam actually did a talk from SkyDogCon 2012. Definitely YouTube that if you're interested in doing this. They go into fantastic detail on how to execute this really well. But what we like to do is take that network traffic that we analyzed and focus our spear phishing attacks against the users based on what they expect to see based on what their usage is of the internet. And you can get all sorts of cool information from it, obviously. What type of users open the emails, open the attachments, and just like the QR code, if they go to a landing page, you could have them enter credentials, things like that, and see what they are entering in sites that they truly don't know that they trust. Another one, rogue Wi-Fi access points. Basically the idea of setting up an access point surrounding your user base. This is no groundbreaking to you guys being at DerbyCon and all. But giving them a fake, SSID saying who it is and who, for our example here, Logarithm Wi-Fi, we set it up at a sales conference where our entire sales team came in and saw how many of those guys were entering their domain credentials on this landing page, just like a hotel Wi-Fi, thinking it was Logarithm's Wi-Fi network at this hotel. Fantastic way to get everyone aware of this type of attack, first of all. A lot of non-technical people now know this is completely possible and extremely easy to execute. But we got lots of metrics around what types of users entered their credentials, and after we saw the credentials, types of weak passwords and so forth. So definitely a good tactic if you're into that. But Greg actually did a whole talk on this topic alone. There's some links there. You can't really see them. It's on YouTube and SlideShare. Let us know if you need them. But went in a lot more detail in a whole hour talk on just this topic. So let us know.
So bridging off of that, I mean, that's like a more of an actual like offensive tactic, like standing up some fake wireless access points, seeing who's going to log in, and I mean, who doesn't like messing with salespeople, right? It's fun, right? So, so that kind of branches into red teaming, and we're not talking about just pen testing where you go scan the network, pop some vulnerabilities, stuff like that. Red teaming is, more adversarial, like actually imitating a real adversary kind of testing. And there's not a lot of companies that actually do this very well, but there are a few out there that do this. And so, I mean, this is something like once your company is mature to a certain point, this is a good kind of next step.
Yeah, so that pretty much sums up the defense side of using diversion and deception to increase your defenses, obviously. But so once you master those, that's when we start to think you can take them into the offensive side to really kind of step up your game and take it to the next step in terms of increasing your security posture as an organization. So let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit.
All right, so we talked about honeypots for defense. Well, let's look at them for offense, right? So in all sorts of enterprise environments, there's always systems out there like scanning the network, sweeping for new systems, new services on systems, stuff like that. And oftentimes, if you're not using SSH keys or things like that, they're just logging in directly to these systems. So we can actually use honeypots in an offensive way during like an internal penetration test. So one of my favorites is Kippo. So the cool thing about Kippo is you just stand this up on like your team's shared pen testing server when you're doing like an internal assessment or something like that, and just leave it up overnight. Just move the real port, the real SSH port, and then stand up a Kippo honeypot on port 22, see what logs in. And so this is just a little script I put together a while ago, but essentially all this does is it just strips out all the passwords that were recently entered into the Kippo honeypot. So you can see here in this example, this is a real pen test, so I had to blank everything out. But it's funny because they actually had the past, the current password, the current domain admin password, and then the past 12 passwords from the previous. So you could basically access everything in the environment just by sitting there and letting them log into you. So really simple tactic. But taking a step further, social engineering is like, this is like kind of the foundation of security in itself, like offensive tactics essentially. So one of my favorite things to do is join forums where developers ask for help and stuff like that, and then talk them into giving you information. Like right here's a good example where this person was coerced into divulging their session token. And the funny thing about this, it's hard to see, but this actually doesn't expire for an entire year. So if you're able to get this, like you can access this application for a whole year, assuming that it doesn't change when they log in again, stuff like that. But taking a step further, if you're actually able to edit the HTML of web pages that are on these support sites, you can hide what commands, like say you want to give them something big to paste into a text file or something like that, or a command prompt and run. Well, you can make it look like this, but in reality, it actually has the real commands hidden behind this using CSS within the web page. So this is called what you see is not what you copy. It's great, right? So here's an example just to kind of highlight how this actually works. So over here we have our attacker, and here's our victim. And here's the HTML page. We're just using JS Fiddle to kind of show the HTML and the rendered content. But right here, this is what they see. So it just says echo, this is a test. And then so they have their listener set up. They just spun up a little netcat listener. And then so here they're going to copy just this text, right? So it looks legit. They're like, oh, I can trust this. They're going to paste it in. And as soon as they do, we get a shell. So, I mean, it's a very rudimentary example, but it is something you could expand upon if you have this level of access in like a support forum or something like that.
So a lot of that stuff focuses on how to actually get into the network, obviously on an offensive side using those tactics. But when we've done this, once we're actually in the network, obviously, there's a lot of post-exploitation tricks that you're going to want to follow using the same tactics. And a lot of the focus is really just around being able to do the basic pen testing type activities, such as elevating privileges, getting those credentials, and pivoting, moving throughout the network, looking for what you're actually after. So we got a couple examples of that stuff as well.
All right. So first example, this is actually a really cool one that FuzzyNop released last year at DerbyCon, which I thought was just awesome. So what this is like, enterprise environments where you're running, we have a bunch of Macs. Oftentimes they don't disable SSH, and so you have a valid enterprise account, so you can usually SSH into other people's boxes. So it's hilarious, but you can do all sorts of stuff other than like just make their computer talk. This is a really cool trick. So here's an example of what this actually does here. So we're just going to pretend we're like SSH into this box. But we're just going to run a quick Apple script, pretty short and simple. And then you see the system preferences pop up. And so as soon as they click that, they're prompted to enter their password. And as soon as they do, it's just passed back to us in plain text. So I mean, it's just a very easy way to ask someone for their credentials. Now on Windows, it's a lot trickier to access systems and stuff like that, but you can do the same exact thing using PowerShell. So actually a talk, if you were in here like a couple talks ago, he actually showed this. He showed my crappy little PowerShell script. But yeah, so this is exactly what it does. So we're going to say we have a Meterpreter session on this host already. Let's say it's like a Bastion host, and we want to migrate to other people's Explorer processes or something like that. Well, we can just run this. We're going to use the post-exploitation execute PowerShell module within Metasploit here. And we're just going to run my crappy little script. And as soon as it runs, they get a layer 8 error, which I thought was funny. And then so they click on that, and then they're just prompted for their credentials. And so they log in. And then as soon as the script finishes executing, it writes the output to this file. And so all we have to do is just read this file, and then we get their plain text credentials right there. So I mean, same sort of thing, just doing it in different ways for different systems. So I just always thought it was fun asking people for their password.
So another idea once you're in is actually attacking security tools. There's a ton of examples, and we're not talking about like popping O-days on, Kaspersky or something like that. Keeping it really basic. Being from a SIM company, we really like to play around with the idea of feeding your SIM fake logs and seeing what you can change on the SIM, what you can tell it to start modifying their end. Or anything. There's tons of examples here that you can see, but spoofing the origin of an Nmap scan. And then again, scraping credentials from security tools that are like scanning the network, doing vulnerability scans or anything like that. And we like to essentially wear AV like a hat in this case. There's a lot. Greg's going to show an example here in a second, but the idea of putting legitimate programs all over shares that IT uses, but first modifying those so we can get access and start playing with it, really cool idea. There are endless examples here, but these are just some of the ones that we've come up recently that we really like to play around with.
So first example, anyone here ever play with Shelter? This is a really cool program. You can run it on both Linux and Windows. But essentially right here, what this program does is it backdoors other programs. So you can have, embed your own code. Essentially, it's a PEX injection tool. And the best part is that AV doesn't pick this tool up, let alone the binaries that you backdoor with it. So I just thought it was funny. So right here, this is a quick little example of what Shelter does. So first we're going to zoom in, and we're just going to show like, oh, we've successfully backdoored this file. And then so over here, all we did was just putty, just decided backdoor putty for this example. And then you can see as soon as we run it, we have a session spawned out. So it just shovels a session out. It still works, which is really cool. And then you just sit back and wait for sessions. You just upload these to a share or something, some trusted place, get other people to install it. It's a very simple way to gain access to other systems. But my favorite by far is just targeting IT people, just tricking them into logging into your system or the system you've compromised. You can do that by disabling services or something like that, so just enough so that someone from IT will have to log into your box. Now the nice thing there, once they log into your box, you can just use Mimikatz and dump their credentials from memory. I mean, it's an age-old trick, but it works really good. So it's just a fun tactic to trick people into essentially exposing their credentials.
Yeah, so we had to kind of burn through a lot of this really fast due to the time limit. But if something in this kind of interests you, why don't you go ahead and let us know. We could talk a little bit more about it in more detail. But basically, hopefully that you guys kind of gain from this talk is being able to use these tactics on the 3 different groups that we think are important within defense, and then taking that towards the offensive side. It works fantastic for us, and it's a lot of fun for both you and your users, so I definitely recommend trying to pursue it if this is something that interests you. Some resources if this also interests you. The top one, big shout out to Paul Sidorian and John Strand for their work done in that book, Offensive Countermeasures. It's a fantastic resource for this same type of tactics, and definitely check it out if that's something that interests you. Other than that, we're about out of time, so thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to grab us outside or hit us up on Twitter or site or anything like that, and we're more than happy to help you out. Thank you guys so much.